The doctor said I died twice on that operating table. But when I opened my eyes and saw my husband holding hands with another woman at my hospital bedside, I realized death would have been kinder. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story gets absolutely insane. My name is Diana Chen, and I'm 32 years old. Just 7 days ago, I walked out of a law office in downtown Chicago as an $11 million heiress. Today I'm lying in a hospital bed watching my husband serve me divorce papers while his new girlfriend smirks in the corner. The twist? She's the attorney who handed me that inheritance check. And she has no idea who I am. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when I received the call that would change everything. I was sitting in my cramped cubicle at Hope Harbor Community Center, where I'd worked as a grant coordinator for the past 6 years. The pay was terrible, barely $42,000 a year, but I loved helping people. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. A crisp professional voice asked if I was Diana Marie Chen, formerly Diana Marie Sullivan, niece of Eleanor Sullivan. My Aunt Eleanor. I hadn't seen her in almost 15 years. She was my father's older sister, a woman who never married, never had children, and supposedly lived a quiet life in Boston. We'd exchanged Christmas cards, nothing more. The voice on the phone belonged to Harold Mitchell, senior partner at Mitchell & Associates. He asked me to come to his office immediately. He said it was regarding my aunt's estate. Estate. The word felt heavy. I drove to the address in my beat-up Honda Civic, the one with the cracked windshield and the check engine light that had been on for 3 months. Harold Mitchell's office was in one of those glass towers that made you feel poor just walking through the lobby. His office smelled like expensive cigars and old leather. He was an elderly white man with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Miss Chen," he said, sliding a folder across his massive mahogany desk. "Your aunt passed away peacefully last month. She left very specific instructions. She wanted you to have everything." Everything turned out to be $11.4 million. A trust fund. Investment portfolios. A brownstone in Boston worth $2 million alone. I sat there, completely frozen, unable to process the numbers he was saying. He explained that my aunt had been a silent partner in a tech company back in the 90s, and her shares had exploded in value. She'd lived simply, saved everything, and now it was mine. All mine. I remember clutching the folder, my hands shaking so badly, the papers rustled. I thought about my husband, Ethan. Ethan Chen, 34 years old, my husband of 8 years. He'd been struggling with his startup, a software company that never quite took off. We'd been living on my salary for the past 3 years while he chased his dream. He'd become bitter, resentful, angry at the world. But this money would change everything. This money would save us. This money would finally make him happy again. I drove home too fast, my heart racing, rehearsing how I'd tell him. I imagined his face lighting up. I imagined us hugging, crying, laughing. I imagined our fresh start. I never made it home. The last thing I remember was the blinding glare of headlights in my rearview mirror. Massive, high-mounted lights. The kind on commercial trucks. They were coming fast, too fast, and I was on a narrow 2-lane road just outside the city. I remember thinking I should pull over, let them pass. But before I could react, there was an earth-shattering impact. The sound was deafening. Metal screaming. Glass exploding. The world spinning violently. Then nothing. Just darkness. When I woke up, the first thing I heard was beeping. A steady, rhythmic beep 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 that cut through the fog in my brain. I tried to open my eyes, but the fluorescent lights felt like daggers stabbing into my skull. Everything hurt. My chest felt like it was being crushed. My ribs burned with every tiny breath. I was in a hospital room at Northwestern Memorial. The air smelled sterile, chemical, with that underlying scent of sickness that hospitals can never quite mask. I tried to move my hand to press the call button, but my entire body felt disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. Finally, a nurse came in. Her name tag read Patricia, and she had warm brown eyes that immediately filled with sympathy when she saw I was awake. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "You're awake. You've been unconscious for 5 days. You were in a terrible accident. A semi-truck hit you head on. You're very lucky to be alive. 5 days." The words didn't make sense. I croaked out one word, my throat raw and painful. "Ethan, my husband. Where is he?" Patricia's expression changed. She looked uncomfortable, sad even. She checked my IV line, adjusted my blankets, clearly stalling. Finally, she spoke. "We've called the emergency contact number you had listed multiple times. Ethan Chen, he never answered. He never called back. No one has come to see you." "That can't be right," I whispered. My voice sounded like sandpaper. He must not know. Maybe his phone is broken. Maybe he's traveling for work. But even as I said it, I knew. Deep down, I knew. Ethan always answered his phone. Always. It was practically glued to his hand. The truth was settling over me like ice water. He knew. He knew I was here, and he hadn't come. 2 days later, I was still alone. The police had come, taken my statement about the accident. They said the truck driver claimed his brakes failed, but they were investigating. I was too weak, too broken to care. I had 3 cracked ribs, a severe concussion, a fractured collarbone, and more bruises than I could count. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest every time I looked at the door, hoping Ethan would walk through. He never did. On day 7, I finally heard his voice. A nurse had helped me to the bathroom, and when I came back, my phone was ringing. It was still cracked from the accident, but it worked. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. I answered so fast I nearly dropped it. "Ethan," I said, my voice breaking. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. I was in an accident. I'm at Northwestern. I'm okay, but I really need you." There was a long pause. Then he spoke, and his voice was cold. Flat. "Yeah, Diana, I know. The hospital called me like 100 times. I've been busy." "Busy?" I repeated, not understanding. "Ethan, I almost died. I need you here." He sighed, the kind of exasperated sigh you give a telemarketer. "Look, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for you anymore. You've been dead weight for years, and honestly, I'm done. I've moved on. Don't call me again." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, unable to process what I'd just heard. Dead weight. Moved on. The man I'd supported, loved, stood by through every failure, every broken promise, had just discarded me like trash. While I was lying in a hospital bed, alone and broken, he'd moved on. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too shocked, too numb. I just lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over. The next day, day 8, everything changed. I was sitting up in bed, trying to eat the terrible hospital oatmeal, when my door opened. I looked up, expecting another nurse. Instead, I saw Ethan. He was wearing a brand new suit, charcoal gray, clearly expensive. His hair was freshly cut. He looked good, healthy, happy even. And he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her hand clasped in his, was a woman I'd never seen before. She was tall, elegant, with sleek black hair pulled into a perfect chignon. She wore a designer pantsuit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. She looked like money. She looked like power. Ethan walked to my bedside without a hint of guilt or concern on his face. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it onto my blanket like he was throwing away garbage. "Divorce papers," he said simply. "Sign them." I looked from him to the woman, my brain struggling to catch up. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman stepped forward, her expression professional, detached. Her voice was crisp and authoritative. "My name is Victoria Lawson. I'm a partner at Klein & Associates. I'm here as Mr. Chen's legal representation and personal companion. The divorce is non-negotiable. He's offered you a very generous settlement of $50,000 and the Honda. I suggest you sign. Victoria Lawson." The name rang a bell somewhere in the back of my concussed brain, but I couldn't place it. I looked at her face, really looked at it, and something flickered in my memory. I'd seen her before. Recently. Where? Then it hit me, my breath caught. The law office. The inheritance meeting. She'd been there. Not in the room, but in the lobby. I'd walked past her. She'd been on her phone, pacing. She'd glanced at me for half a second, just another face in a busy building. She had no idea who I was. But I knew exactly who she was. Because Victoria Lawson wasn't just Ethan's new girlfriend. She was the attorney listed on all my inheritance paperwork. She was one of the junior partners at the firm, managing my $11 million trust. She had access to all my accounts. All my information. Everything. And she was sleeping with my husband. I looked at Victoria, then at Ethan, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't bad timing. This was a plan. Ethan had known about the money. Somehow he'd found out. And he'd gotten close to the one person who could access it. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. I looked up at Victoria and smiled. It was a small, calm smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. "Do you know who I am?" I asked quietly. She looked annoyed, like I was wasting her time. "You're Diana Chen. Ethan's soon-to-be ex-wife." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm Diana Sullivan Chen. Eleanor Sullivan's niece and sole heir." I watched the color drain from her face. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. The expensive briefcase slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the quiet room. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, no. Ethan looked confused, irritated. What are you talking about? But Victoria wasn't listening to him anymore. She was staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. Because she had access to my file. She knew exactly how much money I'd inherited. She knew what she'd just stumbled into. Get out, I said, my voice steady and ice cold. Both of you. Get out right now before I call security. Victoria grabbed her briefcase and practically ran from the room. Ethan stood there, still confused, still angry. What the hell was that about? I looked at him with absolute contempt. You'll find out soon enough. Now leave. He left, slamming the door behind him. I sat there in the silence, my mind racing. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was broken. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I had a visitor. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, walked into my room with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. She introduced herself as Margaret Harrison, the senior partner at Klein & Associates, and Victoria Lawson's direct supervisor. Miss Chen, she said, sitting in the chair beside my bed. I need to speak with you about a very serious matter. Victoria Lawson came to me this morning in a state of panic. She confessed to an inappropriate relationship with your husband and a potential conflict of interest regarding your trust. I want you to know that we take this extremely seriously. I listened carefully, saying nothing. Margaret continued. I've already removed Victoria from your account. She will be placed on administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation. I will personally oversee your trust moving forward. I'm also here to inform you that we found some irregularities in your account activity. Irregularities? I asked. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of transactions. Small transfers. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. All from the past week, all going to accounts I didn't recognize. The total was nearly $60,000. This is theft, Margaret said bluntly, and given Victoria's access and her relationship with your husband, we believe she was attempting to embezzle from your trust. We've already contacted the authorities. I felt vindication surge through me. But there was something else nagging at me. The accident. The timing was too perfect. I just inherited the money, and suddenly a truck with failed brakes hit me head-on. I shared my suspicions with Margaret. She listened, her expression growing darker. Then she made a phone call. Within an hour, a detective from the Chicago Police Department was sitting in my hospital room. His name was Detective James Morrison, a stocky man in his 40s with tired eyes. He took my statement about the accident. He took notes about Ethan's behavior, about Victoria, about the money. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. Miss Chen, we've been investigating your accident. The truck driver who hit you? His name is Kyle Sanders. He's a known associate of organized crime figures. His brake failure story didn't check out. We found evidence the brakes were deliberately sabotaged before the crash. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder. The room spun. Someone had tried to kill me. Someone wanted me dead. Who would want me dead? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Detective Morrison looked at me seriously. We're investigating all possibilities. But given the timing of your inheritance and the financial irregularities, we're looking very closely at everyone who knew about the money. Over the next few weeks, as I slowly recovered in the hospital, the investigation unfolded. The police discovered that Victoria had been in a relationship with Ethan for over 6 months. They'd met at a networking event. She'd eventually told him about a huge inheritance case she was working on, about a client who'd just come into $11 million. She never gave him my name, but Ethan wasn't stupid. He'd put the pieces together. What the police found next was even worse. Ethan had contacted Kyle Sanders through a middleman. He'd paid him $25,000 to cause a fatal accident. The plan was simple. Kill me, divorce me posthumously to avoid suspicion, then marry Victoria, and slowly gain access to my trust through her. But they'd made mistakes. Ethan had used his personal credit card for the initial payment to the middleman. There were text messages, phone records, a digital trail so obvious it was almost insulting. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. My older sister. I need to tell you something about my family. I have one sibling, my sister Jennifer. Jennifer Chen, 36 years old, married to a successful commercial real estate developer named Scott Martinez. Jennifer had always been the golden child. The successful one. The favorite. She had the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect 2-story house in the suburbs. She'd visited me once in the hospital, early on. She'd seemed concerned, sympathetic. She'd brought flowers. We'd talked about the accident, about Ethan's betrayal. I'd told her everything. About the inheritance. About Victoria. About the police investigation. She'd hugged me and told me she loved me. Then she'd left, and I didn't hear from her again. Until Detective Morrison came back to see me, 3 weeks after the accident. His face was grim. Miss Chen, he said. We've arrested Ethan and Victoria. But there's more. We executed a search warrant on your husband's apartment. We found financial records that show he received a large cash payment just before the accident. The money came from an offshore account. We traced it. It belongs to Scott Martinez, your brother-in-law." I felt like I'd been punched. "Scott? Why?" Detective Morrison showed me the evidence. Scott had embezzled money from his own company, nearly $2 million, to cover gambling debts. He was facing bankruptcy and federal charges. He'd been desperate. And when Jennifer told him about my inheritance, told him I was vulnerable and alone in the hospital, he'd seen an opportunity. He'd contacted Ethan, offered him money to finish what the truck driver had started, offered to help him access my trust through Victoria. They'd formed a conspiracy. All three of them, working together to kill me and steal everything. But Jennifer didn't know. Detective Morrison assured me of that. She'd innocently told Scott about my situation, never imagining he'd try to use it to murder me. I didn't believe him. I called Jennifer myself. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Diana," she said. "How are you feeling?" "I know," I said simply. "I know what Scott did. I know about the money he sent to Ethan." There was a long, damning silence. Then she spoke, and her voice was different. Colder. "Diana, you have to understand. Scott and I have worked so hard for everything we have. We built our life from nothing. And then you who've always been the screw-up, the one who never amounted to anything, you just fall into $11 million? It's not fair." "Not fair?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "So you think I should die?" She didn't answer directly. She just said, "You were supposed to die in the accident. It would have been clean. But you survived," and Ethan panicked. "He shouldn't have come to the hospital. He ruined everything." I hung up. They arrested Scott that evening. They arrested Jennifer the next morning as an accessory after the fact. She'd known about the plan to kill me in the hospital and hadn't reported it. She'd helped Scott cover his tracks. She'd chosen her husband's greed over her sister's life. My mother, Linda Sullivan, came to see me after the arrests. She's 68 years old, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair and sad eyes. She sat beside my hospital bed and cried. She apologized. He'd contacted Ethan, offered him money to finish what the truck driver had started, offered to help him access my trust through Victoria. They'd formed a conspiracy. All three of them, working together to kill me and steal everything. But Jennifer didn't know. Detective Morrison assured me of that. She'd innocently told Scott about my situation, never imagining he'd try to use it to murder me. I didn't believe him. I called Jennifer myself. The judge called him a parasite and a coward. He was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. When the sentence was read, Ethan turned and looked at me. His eyes weren't sad. They weren't apologetic. They were filled with pure, burning hatred. He was furious that I'd survived. That I'd won. Victoria Lawson took a plea deal. She confessed to embezzlement, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. She was disbarred and sentenced to 12 years. Her legal career, her reputation, everything she'd built, gone in an instant. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked small and broken, nothing like the powerful woman who'd walked into my hospital room. Scott Martinez was convicted of wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. He received 25 years. His real estate empire collapsed. His investors sued him. He lost everything. And Jennifer, my sister, the jury found her guilty as an accessory to attempted murder. She received 8 years. At her sentencing, she finally looked at me. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I looked away. My mother sat in the back of the courtroom through every trial, every hearing. She aged 10 years in those 4 months. She lost both her daughters. One to prison, one to betrayal. Our relationship is broken, maybe beyond repair. She calls me sometimes. I rarely answer. Now, I'm sitting in my new home. Not the Boston brownstone. I sold that. I bought a modern loft in Seattle, far from Chicago, far from the memories. I started a foundation with part of the inheritance, helping survivors of domestic violence and attempted murder. I work with victims, help them rebuild, show them they're not alone. I learned that money doesn't change people. It reveals them. $11 million didn't make Ethan greedy. It just exposed the greed that was always there, hiding beneath the surface. I learned that family isn't always blood. The nurse, Patricia, who sat with me when I was alone, Detective Morrison, who fought for justice, Margaret Harrison, who protected my interests, they were my real family. And I learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about refusing to let the people who tried to destroy you define who you become. They called me a loser. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd be easy to kill, easy to rob, easy to forget. They were wrong. I survived. I thrived. And I made sure they paid for every single moment they made me suffer. That's my story. The story of how I inherited $11 million and discovered that the people who promised to love me were the ones who wanted me dead. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever had to rebuild your entire life after someone tried to destroy you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to die. Thank you for listening.